Hello, and welcome to Graywood Gardening. It is early August now, and I figured it would be time to do another garden tour and give a quick update on everything going on. And we'll be starting today in the Veggie Garden, because it's hard to believe that it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago that the whole Veggie Garden was in a pretty dire state, thanks in part to hot weather, late planting, but also to a nitrogen deficiency. I have been fertilizing with an organic liquid fertilizer once a week since, and it is amazing how everything has taken off. Now, you do have to keep in mind that the whole garden was planted out at the end of June, so everything looks the way it should have looked about a month ago, but still everything's very healthy. In fact, the corn, which is also doing great, was actually planted after the 4th of July. And so this is on the list of crops that I don't know if we're going to get anything from it or not this year, but we'll find out. So let's take a look. Everything's doing so much better than last time we were in the Veggie Garden. All right, starting with the corn here. The corn is easily twice the size it was a few weeks ago. And just past the corn, the basil is knocking it out of the park. This basil is actually very, very overdue for a harvest. And in fact, it is trying to bolt here and there, which is what these little flower heads you can see on top are. And of course, you can just pinch those off. But all of that will come off once I harvest it, which I should be doing very, very soon now. So over here in the primary row of 5 beds, I have just recently replanted carrots over here, and I'm doing a trick I learned from the M.I. Gardener YouTube channel for planting carrots in hot weather. As he said, you soak it really, really well, then cover it with cardboard for about a week until it germinates, and that helps keep the surface of the ground moist, which is really hard to do in the summer. All right, next bed over here, I just recently planted a bunch of bush beans. This is another crop that, who knows if I'm going to get beans. It's about 50 days to maturity, so if we have a late freeze this year, I'll be okay. If we have an early one, we're going to lose it because the beans cannot survive any kind of a frost. But amazingly over here, the tomato plant is recovering and growing great. In fact, it's kind of flopping over here because I really thought we were going to lose the tomatoes, so I told Mrs. Graywood not to bother getting any kind of supports. These are bush tomatoes, determinate variety. And now we need to do something to get a tomato cage or some sort of trellis cage to hold these guys up. Really doing well over here though is the summer squash. We got 2 yellow squash and 2 zucchini. And this is just shockingly night and day from what these things were just a couple of weeks ago. I mean, I think 3 weeks ago when I started fertilizing, these things were like the same size they were when they were planted a month before. And now they're doing great. They're looking super, super healthy. The zucchini have a variegated leaf. This is not powdery mildew. That's just how the leaf looks. So it's doing great. The hot peppers are very overdue for harvesting. I need to get to that today or tomorrow. In fact, while we have been harvesting and using some of the jalapenos, we are so far behind that some of the jalapenos, so I can get a shot here, are turning red. When the jalapenos turn red, they are even hotter, which is not something that Mrs. Graywood is a big fan of. So I need to hurry up and get these guys harvested. Also over here, these are Roma tomatoes. Again, really, really doing well considering what a rough state they were in so recently. You can see it's also flopping over, but it's kind of a giant bush now. I think there is a very, very good chance that we are going to get some tomatoes this year. Which I really thought we weren't going to, but now it's looking good. Bell peppers, the one thing that was doing well in the garden, continues to be doing very well. We've actually been harvesting bell peppers on and off for a while. We're letting a bunch of them change color. There's a big one in front, I don't know, it's at least a few days, maybe a week away from being fully red, but that's a nice sized pepper there. Got another guy up here turning red, so super happy with the peppers. One thing I have done is I did build a few more raised beds. So I got the raised beds in that are going to be used for the fall garden. This one right here And this one here, the two 10-foot ones, I think I'm going to use for broccoli and cauliflower. And this guy over here, I have a little makeshift trellis. I planted some snow peas, and in front of that I have spinach. Of course, broccoli, cauliflower, snow peas, spinach, they can all handle a light frost. So this is a fantastic time to have all of them going in. The broccoli and cauliflower, of course, are hardening off right now. I actually seeded them in seed trays almost a month ago now. All right, and this last one, which I did not have anything for, so I planted a bunch of sunflower seeds in, only because I was so disappointed that deer were eating all of our sunflowers. I said, screw it, I'm planting some sunflowers over here in the veggie garden where the deer can't get to them. I also just recently transplanted in the middle of this some French sorrel. I started this from seeds. It was probably ready to plant out 2 months ago. It is a perennial leafy green. And so the really nice thing about that is it will come up very, very early in the year before you can have any spinach or lettuce. It has a little bit of a lemony flavor. It is supposed to be phenomenal in smoothies. You normally wouldn't want to eat a salad full of French sorrel. You'd want to have a handful of French sorrel leaves in your salad. But so I finally decided I gotta get these out now if they're gonna come out at all. I'm not using most of this bed, so I planted them here. One other area of the veggie garden that can't be overlooked is the Cucurbit Alley, which is all of our, again, planted a month late, tomatoes and melons, cantaloupe, pumpkins. So this is a black diamond watermelon plant that does have its first little watermelon going on over here. Next to it is another black diamond that has actually been growing a watermelon for some time. So this guy is actually a pretty good size now. This is a different variety of watermelon. I don't know if this is Ace or Chubbiness. This actually has 2 watermelons exactly this size on it, but the plant stopped growing and the watermelon stopped growing, and so we decided to cut off one of the watermelons to try to reduce the amount that the plant was trying to do. I think, again, we got it in so late, it started producing watermelons later than it should, and it just doesn't have enough foliage and plant growth to support it. We have a cantaloupe over here coming on nicely. Our second cantaloupe has 2 little cantaloupes growing. These also have kind of stopped getting bigger for a while, so I'm a little concerned about them. We have 2 butternut squash, which are growing some butternut squashes here and here. See that squash in there? Our pumpkins have been pretty slow to put on fruit. We had one in here that was fruiting, but something burrowed its way. There was a little hole in the pumpkin, so we cut that off and tossed it. We have one good-sized pumpkin growing here. In fact, ooh, getting a hint of orange on it. I think this is supposed to be a pie pumpkin. I'd have to check my chart to find out which is which. And our saddest-looking pumpkin plant over here is actually the only other one producing a pumpkin. But hopefully we will have enough time for pumpkins to produce a bunch more pumpkins. The melons, I think, is a little bit up in the air whether we're going to get ripe melons before the year is over. So leaving the veggie garden, we will head over to the Cottage Garden. The Cottage Garden, which is its first year, has been doing great. It's desperately in need of weeding right now. And I would say it's not looking at its greatest. We have a lot of since it's its first year, we were relying a lot on annuals for a lot of the color, and we still have a lot of annuals going, but they're not quite as peppy as they were a month ago. We do have, these Gazzanias are doing phenomenally though. And we have some echinacea in here that is blooming very, very nicely for its first year. Super looking forward to what these guys look like next year. One thing I'm super excited about is in here we have a bunch of lavender. And so that should bloom next year. This is a Munstead style lavender. Basically all lavender is zone 5, so it's a little questionable here in Minnesota. I think it's going to be okay because the cottage garden is in the middle of this driveway, and that means that all winter that's going to be covered with a very nice thick layer of snow from all of the snow that we shovel from the driveway. So I think that'll give enough insulation that it should be okay despite the fact that it's zone 4. Behind it we have the New England Aster here that I started from seed and has grown absolutely huge. I did not think the Aster was going to be this big this year. It almost looks like it's going to bloom this year. And right here, this is a little sad. These are Perennial Bachelor buttons, and I don't know what happened to them. They bloomed a second time, so they had like a second blooming, which was lovely, and now they're just like giving up, like they're done. However, a big success here is our Chrysanthemums. And these are just looking huge and beautiful. We've got one of them over here just beginning to bloom. These big ones are full of buds, so this should be fantastic color for us moving into September. We pulled a bunch of the milkweed out because it was falling down. I made sure there was no chrysalis or caterpillars on it, but a lot of it we are leaving standing. I don't know if you can see that. It looks like the wasps are a big fan of the milkweed. Also have some pretty big egg clusters here on the leaf. This I'm pretty sure is not monarch, but instead is a kind of moth that we had last year, and the caterpillars just devoured the milkweed, stripped it bare. So the very front part of the cottage garden, which I think right now is probably the best looking area, we have another little cluster of echinacea that are doing phenomenally well. Again, I'm really impressed with how nicely these are doing for their first year. This is a different kind of aster in front. And then we have butterfly weed, which is another variety of milkweed back here, which is also doing phenomenally for a first year perennial. And we have Rebecca, some cosmos, a sad looking bee balm, which is definitely getting some powdery mildew, so we'll see how he does next year, but we'll have to make sure we don't plant anything at all close to him so he has lots and lots of airflow. A couple things in the back of the garden, which is generally not very attractive, but that I'm happy about, is this guy right here is a showy goldenrod that I started from seed and planted out, so no bloom until next year, but that is a phenomenal, giant, strong plant. So I'm super excited about how that guy's going to look next year, and I actually have a few more. This is showy goldenrod, and another one here. And the goldenrod is very tall, and so the idea is that's going to be the back of the garden, giving us some fall yellow. And then in front of that, here is the yarrow that I seeded and planted out, also growing really, really well and getting well established. And one of these guys is actually trying to bloom, and I'm not even sure if I should probably cut that stem off. Probably don't want him to bloom this small on the first year. Spend his time getting ready for winter. The one nice thing, we do have some prairie blazing star, which is absolutely my favorite form of liatris. Unlike most spiky plants, liatris actually blooms from the top and works its way down, whereas most spiky plants bloom from the bottom up. Alright, so that overall is the cottage garden. It looks a lot better from the front than it does the back. But a lot of what's going on in the back right now, other than endless milkweed falling over, is plants that we're establishing that'll be very tall to provide background color when viewed from the house next year. Alright, from the cottage garden, let's pop over to the area that will in the future become the orchard. Right now, we pretty much just have this planted with wildflowers, and of course, 90% of that wildflower area grew with grass. So it's a lot of grass and some wildflowers, but we also put in here one single apple tree. And this is our Cortland Apple, and it looks like it is growing incredibly well. It's super healthy, it's putting on new growth. I'm very, very happy with it. The deer have not been able to get to it through this this big fence enclosure. So, very excited. We'll have to start reading some books on how to prune apple trees, but don't need to worry about that till next year. So, the Wildflower Meadow area on the orchard side is definitely a lot less flowers than it is on the other side of the driveway. And it is pretty attractive. Let me focus. I mean, we still have, you know, a lovely sea of wildflowers pretty much anywhere you look. It's just not nearly as dense as I would have hoped. So in addition to grass and wildflowers, I have a couple other things planted over here. The first of which is I planted a bunch of bare root willow trees, Salix hybrid willows. And I think I ordered 30, I got 27. I planted them all, and I don't know, maybe 20 of them actually lived. And, you know, a chunk of them just never grew. Like this one, you can see the stem that I planted died off, but a new little willow grew from the base. Same thing happened over here with this one, whereas other ones, right here, the stem that I got has been growing nicely. So the idea here is that these willows will be the beginning of a coppice, and will also provide a lot of screening between us and the neighbors. The final thing over here, oh look, here's some cleome. My father collected these seeds from his own cleome and gave me a big bag full of them. Oh, here's some more. It's so nice to see a bunch of these things coming up from the wildflower mix. And then we also have our Norway spruce. Planted 2 of these, one on either side of the driveway. It has been establishing really, really well. It's been growing pretty steadily, even though this is its first year in. You can see we've got new growth on the tips. So overall, I'm very happy with it. I am hopeful that we have established a nice, strong tree that will grow up, hopefully pretty quickly. All right, as we head over across the driveway, we get to the area of the Wildflower Meadow that has had a lot more success. Where we have some patches like here, which are really pretty densely packed with flowers. It looks like most of the Coreopsis has finished blooming. Still a few of them in here. But instead, I'm very excited to say we're getting some black-eyed Susans growing in here and blooming. And that's very exciting to me because these are perennials. I didn't know they would bloom the first year. But that these guys are all establishing and should be much larger and more impressive plants next year. I don't know what that dark red guy there is. And of course, over here, we have another Norway spruce on this side of the driveway. It looks like we did have a couple branches die. The tips of a couple branches have died. Here, and then up toward the top, where we were getting a lot of new growth, we have also had the tips of a couple branches die. I'm not super worried about it right now because we're still getting more new growth. I'm going to write this off for the time being to, you know, just its transition and getting planted. But if it gets any worse, I'll probably start looking into what we can do. I have a bunch of cosmos starting to bloom over here. Orange, pink, and tons more. I mean, there's cosmos all over here that haven't yet started budding. So I think probably in another 2 weeks, we're just going to have cosmos blooming all over the wildflower area. I have no idea what this guy is. So, as we talked about in the last video, in addition to our wildflowers, we have a couple big empty areas where there were huge trees. And a viewer actually commented, and I think with the answer of why we have these bare areas. And she said she's seen it before where trees were cut down with gas-powered chainsaws, and it's areas where gas or oil spilled, and that's why nothing grows, right? Because it's not just the wildflowers that are growing, there's no grass growing here either. So that means I'm actually starting to see, like, here and there, some stuff is growing. So it's not as bare a patch as it was earlier in the year. So I am hopeful that this means we can put a nice thick layer of compost here and get some new stuff seeded next year. And it is interesting where you have these wildflowers and then look at these patches of just huge grass growing. We'll have other patches of really low grass growing, where things are really only like ankle high with the occasional flower. But overall, continue to be very, very happy with the Wildflower Meadow. And if there's some big grassy patches, that's fine. That just means I can come in here and plant some stuff in those grassy patches next year. Now let's go take a look at the Terrace Garden. Actually, before we get to the Terrace Garden, something fun to see is here. I have finally managed to completely get rid of the wood chip pile. So now I have a big empty area that you would think could be maybe tilled under and planted. It's pretty compacted now, so you need to break it up. But what I think we're actually going to do is we have these giant piles of logs stacked in the back of the meadow area. So the plan is to, any of these logs that are, maybe smaller than 12, 18 inches, to get those chipped, because we're going to need more wood chips. We're going through our chips so fast. But the really big ones, we're going to get restacked up here where the wood chip pile was. And then hopefully we're going to get someone with a portable sawmill, assuming we can find someone, to come out and cut those logs up into boards. So I think it would be awesome to be able to build stuff out of the trees that were on our property. All right, moving up to the Terrace Garden. And the lower Terrace Garden right now is mostly about this beautiful patch of zinnias, which has done super, super well. It was supposed to be half of the Terrace Garden. All of the sunflowers have been eaten again and again and again. There's a couple of them that are still trying to grow up from all the points where they've been eaten, but I think they're going to keep getting eaten. I don't think we're going to have sunflowers up here. And of course, on the other side, we planted all of the poppies, and we only had 2 of them germinate, and those 2 then died. So, ooh, that's thunder. Better wrap this up. So this side is still empty, and I think I'm just going to plant a cover crop here to hold it over the rest of the year. Oh, interesting point, just on the other side of this, right here is some of the ornamental grass that we pulled out of the Cottage Garden. This is Miscanthus purpurascens. Really, really beautiful stuff. We put most of it over on the bank by the entrance to the Veggie Garden, but we had so much of it we had to find other places. So the idea was to use this ornamental grass here as sort of a visual barrier between where the lawn stops and where the wildflower area starts. All right, final area on the Terrace Garden. We have the upper Terrace Garden, which we have a little row of low-growing zinnias. We have another patch of New England Aster that we started from seed that are doing great. And we have the peonies that we planted. Are doing pretty well. That one's got some zinnias getting pretty close to it. That peony's doing much better. So hopefully we'll have some decent-sized peonies next year. Most of this area is still pretty empty. We never made it back out to the garden center to fill in the rest of this area. We do have our forsythia growing nicely in back, and I'm starting to wood chip it. I eventually want these gardens entirely wood chipped. Have a silver mound, some annual salvia, catmint, lamb's ear. My idea was everything up here in the border, because this is right by our front porch, I wanted to be stuff that our 2-year-old could play with, right? Stuff that felt fuzzy like the lamb's ear, or smelled good like the capsmint or the Artemisia silver mound. So far, the only thing she's shown any interest in is the rocks. She likes to pick up the rocks and carry them away. We also have some straw flower that we started from seed back here, but it has not yet bloomed. It's also kind of shady here underneath the giant river birch. Okay, that is everything that we have going on right now in all of the gardens here at the beginning of August. Next time, I think we're gonna go back in the veggie garden and work on finishing off planting out the fall garden. We do have some broccoli and cauliflower that are just about done hardening off. I'm also gonna plant a cover crop here in the lower terrace garden, something to just keep this dirt covered for the rest of the year. And we now have an entirely new garden that we need to at least build the infrastructure for before the end of the year. Well, until then, happy gardening.